Welcome to the Planting Wildflowers podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Leonardis. I'm an entrepreneur, wife, mom, and stepmom. I'm super interested in people and perspectives, and I love how a good conversation can leave you feeling empowered. Sometimes even pique your curiosity to learn and grow. Mostly, though, I love how really listening to one another opens up limitless opportunities for that beautiful sense of connection and community that we all love. Thanks for tuning in. Let's be inspired. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Planting Wildflowers podcast. I am so lucky to be your host. I'm Rebecca Leonardis. And on today's show, I have the delight of speaking with our friend, Jessica Dabrowski. If you guys have not yet listened to episode 9, I'm going to encourage you to hit pause, go back to episode 9, give that a real good listen through, because you are going to have such a wonderful experience getting to know Jessica, hearing her story, hearing her advice on some just unbelievably terrific ideas for coping with anxiety. It's well worth you taking a step back before playing this episode. But regardless, you're here now. Those of you who have already listened to episode 9 are probably just as excited as I am to have Jessica back. We are thrilled that you said yes to coming back and providing us with a part 2 to our conversation, because it was good. We had some really, really good stuff on the go, and anxiety is a topic that deserves a whole heck of a lot of attention. So, Jessica, let me remind our listeners that you are an anxiety relief coach. You are a lot of things, and you know me, I really don't like labeling people, but these are some of the things that you've done. And I still get such a thrill knowing that you left a PhD program and followed your intuition. You took heed of that nudge that was guiding you in a different direction. It's not to say that your joy and talent in academia don't still exist, but sometimes the soul knows where it needs to go. And I'm thrilled that you had the wherewithal to listen to that nudge and to follow that inner guidance, because the world needs what you're offering. Jessica, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I was actually just talking about that with a friend yesterday, about leaving academia, and honestly how hard that was, just because I was trained for my whole life to go get a certain degree and go get this job and let that whole degree and your performance define you as a person. And I just identified so much with that. But even though I've left that to become anxiety relief coach, a healer, a life coach, I could be titled with a lot of things, that I've carried a lot of that still with me. I mean, we were just talking about this before, is even my education in earth science and chemistry and all of that allows me to understand quantum physics and spirituality, and is key to the crystals that I'm wearing right now that connect me so much to the earth. And that's been a big part of my mindfulness practices, to reduce the anxiety that I experience. And yeah, it's all still connected. And there was a part of me when I first started this that was oh, I wasted so many years of my life going down that academic road. Why didn't I start helping people with their mental health, their happiness, so much earlier? And I thought, well, I needed a lot of those skills that I learned. I needed to almost be shoved into, scientific conferences or on boats in the middle of the Arctic to be where I am right now, and to be the person that I am right now. And yeah, without all of that, I think I wouldn't be who I am today. There's just no way. Right. So I mean, it's like a domino effect. Right. And you have no idea which way the dominoes are going to fall. Cause you have a whole bunch of them kind of set up. Yeah. And so I know that we were talking a little bit earlier about previous podcasts you've had about, someone who was a corporate chef that like became a mindful eating and like disordered eating educator and all of that. And I think that, having me on, I definitely sense this theme of like, it's okay to release the career or the identity that you had, as long as it's bringing you closer to the roots of who you are. And I know that like plays so much into the theme of the Planting Wildflowers like podcast, right? It's like, I know you're leading this podcast, but I'm like, this is a really great advertisement for you here.
Yes, thank you very much.
I just sense this theme and this energy of between me and a lot of the other guests you've had, and just to anyone listening to this who's considering like leaving a career or leaving a certain path that you've been on, or like ditching a certain identity that you've had. It's really freaking hard, but if it's bringing you closer to who you truly are and what you should be doing, then do it. And and also if you feel like, this isn't where I was supposed to be, this isn't where I was supposed to go, and you're kind of going sideways on what you feel like should be the line or that is your life, like that's probably important. And it's probably going to like end up being very important and playing out for you as an advantage later on. A friend of mine, she went back to her hometown because of the pandemic and stuff and started teaching German in a middle school. And now she's like tapping into entrepreneurship and creating an app for language learning. And she was initially like she wanted to be doing work with refugees and like immigration law and all of that. And she was almost upset to be teaching again, like as a backup. But now she's super excited about this. And so it just goes to show that like our path is supposed to be winding. It's supposed to be all over the place. And that's how it's almost like how we funnel ourselves into the place that we're supposed to be. Right. It's like it's like a sorting process almost.
That's a great way to think of it. It takes a lot of courage.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it takes all of these years. For some of us, it takes years before you muster the courage to make.
And there's no shame in that
choice.
either.
No, not at all. Not at all. So regardless of where you're at in life, if where you're at isn't bringing you the type of joy that genuinely lights you up, I mean, maybe it's now time to pause and give that some consideration.
Yeah.
I love that you shared that, Jessica. Thank you. Because I think many more of us than we would like to admit feel as though we could be doing so much more. And we have such a limited time here, such a limited time. I mean, if you're not curating a life that is driven by joy, that's the waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like such a harsh thing to say, but there's so much more that could be filling not only your own cup, but providing so much in service to other people. So
yeah. And going off of that, and this is going to tap into, I think, the conversation that will go down the path of self-worth and everything later on. But when I was speaking with my friend yesterday, what I was talking about with her was how we feel like we should be doing what other people say that we should be doing, right? Even we were talking about tutoring and how she was feeling bad for having like tutoring in an enrichment way, like for gifted children instead of underprivileged children who needed to catch up in school. And then I was feeling very similarly. I felt guilt for quite a while about, not bringing mental health to underprivileged schools or like working as a counselor or something like that. And instead, like I have very like high ticket coaching programs. I also have very affordable ones like in courses and all that kind of stuff. And like almost this idea of like, I'm helping people who don't need as much help and feeling bad for that. But I realized that, if you're just doing something out of guilt or doing something because you think you should be doing it, or focusing your energy on what the world is telling you to focus your energy on instead of where you are in your zone of genius, or where your intuition is like fully tapped into, or where your gifts are like fully expressed. If you're like if you're following the people pleasing instead of yourself, you're not bringing as much of a positive impact into the world. Right. And so I that's something that helped me, I think, eliminate a lot of that guilt. Was just like, I bring so much more energy and so much more love into this world, like as a healer rather than like a climate change scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Could I also impact the world positively? But having been a climate change scientist and a professor and an educator and all of that, and helping people not hate chemistry, yeah. But I'm going to have so much more love to give when I'm doing well. Like, so not just in the career that I'm in, but just like thriving and flourishing overall, like requires you to ditch a lot of things besides like your career that's not serving you. Right. And just it feels really terrible at first, right? I call it like it's ego death. It's like shedding layers of yourself, and
Oh,
it can be really painful. Like, imagine, like, I don't know if snakes go through pain when they shed a skin, but I feel like they would. But imagine it's like shedding layers of your skin, because your brain wants to like hold on to that identity for so long. And so it was it was a painful process, even like getting rid of relationships that weren't serving me, getting rid of friendships that weren't serving me, getting rid of my like career and so many things, even the clothes I wore, and shifting all of that. It it can be painful, but now it allows me to give so much more energy to the rest of the world.
of course.
Right. And yeah. And so know that for anyone who's like thinking about making any kind of shift, whether it's in a relationship or a career or a passion or where you live or just anything that you've been attached to for a while, or a way you've been doing things that you think you should, but it actually feels uncomfortable and it actually like makes you miserable when you wake up in the morning. Know that going through it will probably be painful, and it might make you question like what it is that you're doing. Cause there are still moments when I question myself.
Mm-hmm.
And like, am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing this? But that's just that old identity, that old part of me talking, that like wants the familiarity, that wants that comfort back. And so it's just seeking that comfort, but it's not actually comfortable. It's just familiar, right? Because I was actually
Oh,
miserable.
great distinction. Great
Yeah.
distinction. I love that.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable. It's familiar. I think so many of us fall back into that because it is
Mm-hmm.
familiar. It's how you know how to behave and how to feel. And even if it's not good, you know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
oh, that's
The
amazing.
unknown, like the unknown joy seems less touchable than like the familiar pain. Right. And it seems like the unfamiliar joy is going to be like more painful. But most of the time it's not. As long as if it's something where you're actually feeling uncomfortable and you're getting rid of it, even if it's not the best thing that you move on to next, it's bringing you closer. Like I said, like funneling you to where you should truly be, where like, not that joy or happiness is a destination. I think
Mhm.
it's a continuous process, and it's a way to live life rather than a place to reach. But the act of like incorporating joy into your life is is almost like that funneling process. Yeah.
You're pretty wise. You know
Hmm.
this, right? I think you've lived many lifetimes. You've collected a lot of information and you get it. So many things that you said in there. Ego death. I wrote ego death down. That's quite a term. That is
Yeah.
something to certainly explore. I love these conversations with you. I'm so glad that you're back. And
Yeah. And
I'm
this is
eager.
nothing we jotted down as bullet points either about
No.
ideas to cover, but I think it's a really great, like just the way you introduced me, I was like, I need to talk about this because this was coming up in a conversation yesterday. And I know it's something that so many people are going to resonate with. And even having gone through like the pandemic and so many parts of our lives changing, right? Just going through any change, whether it is voluntary or involuntary, can feel like really painful. But everything that we experience like can bring us closer to who we are. And in terms of like all the wisdom, I know and I think other people who are listening, I think you may identify with this as well, but I identify um, as like a chain breaker, like as someone who's been put on this earth to like end the generations of like crap that my family has like gone through. And I think that there's many of us who are like awakening during this time to that, like awakening to the fact that we are like not going to be doing the careers that like our families or our friends think we should be doing. And we're not going to be like following those patterns anymore. And not only has like my own ego had to die many times, and it's going to continue to do that. I go through that process like over and over again. It's kind of iterative. There's also so much identity that like my bloodline and my family and like my culture, like even as an American and as a Polish person, has like died too. Like a lot of that has, it's not just my own identity. It's like identities that have been carried and pushed on me too,
Sure.
that need to be
Yeah.
shed. And it's hard, right? Because they've been rooted so deeply for so long. And
It's literally part of the fiber of you. It is
Mhm.
the, yeah, so that is a difficult thing. That's not something to be taken lightly at all. And I love what you said about, being here to end it's basically ending the perpetuation of suffering, suffering in a lot of different ways, being a
Yeah.
people pleaser being one of them. And there's a variety of things that we suffer through because we believe that that is the way things are. And
Yeah.
this is the first generation, in my opinion, the first generation that has arrived here to, like you said, be the chain breaker. And many of us will do that in a variety of unique ways. But I think what an optimistic view that provides for the following generation, knowing
Yeah.
that their life is virtually a creation of their own making, because what makes them is, this their fiber is made up of someone who was in fact a chain breaker, so that perpetuation of suffering has since ended and they are free. They're liberated in their own destiny, whatever that
Mm.
may be.
Oh my
What a
gosh, this
nice
gets me
thought.
so excited, like for my little
Yeah.
children that are going to rule the freaking planet. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
we
They're
need
going to
them to,
have
right?
nothing holding them back. And that's exactly what I want for my children and anyone following me. Even my younger brother, I consider him to be in a different generation than me because he's 12 years younger. So he's
Mhm.
kind of a different generation.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'm just so excited for like the path that we are paving for other people. Ah, okay. This is totally an
It's
aside,
thrilling.
but it was super cool.
It is, but no, it's worth calling, it's worth celebrating when
Yeah.
this generation is a pivotal generation, and that is worth its weight in gold in terms of celebrating. It is a pivotal generation is required for any kind of change. If we're going to take a
Mm.
new direction, and you and I are about to dive into a topic that was part of the suffering experience. We did keep things like anxiety, depression, self worth under our hats because previous generations were not enabled, were not liberated to speak on these topics. This was hush.
Oh
And
yeah. I even my own grandfather, I never met him because he passed away way before I was born when my mom was just 12. Um, he I mean, he was an alcoholic, but I think he also had some kind of mental illness like schizophrenia, or I mean, even if he was just like a chronically anxious person.
Mhm.
I never met him, so I can't like diagnose him or anything. I haven't read his like notebooks or something like that, but he ended up like lighting my mom's house on fire because he was so angry in a drunk rage, like at his own, like at my grandmother. Everyone like was fine. Everyone survived. Nobody got hurt because they like had escaped to the barn or something like that. But he was, instead of him getting treatment, instead of him getting like love and care, or like being put into a rehab, or someone saying like, hey, or like, are you okay, right, or being brought to like a psychiatrist, he was tied up and thrown into a basement for 3 days.
Mm.
And then I think he was thrown into jail, but like they left him in a basement without, like, I don't even know if they were feeding him or giving him water or whatever, but that's what they did to anyone who like struggled with anxiety or anyone who didn't seem normal,
Right.
right? is they just would like tie you up and like throw you away because it was so taboo. And I think in Poland, in places outside the US or Canada, that there's still a lot of places where mental health is not, it's not a topic of discussion. And if you bring up the fact that you like experience anxiety symptoms like dissociating from your body, or anything that seems kind of weird, or you start to go numb or something like that, or you panic, that you can't tell people about that. I have clients in India where like they can't tell their family members that because they'll end up getting tied up or like sent away somewhere or something like that, right? And so I think just the fact that the fact that the internet exists and this can be reached anywhere around the world, anyone who has internet can really access this, right? And the fact that we're not being silenced now is great because we get to talk about all these things, and start to shout this message to the world that like, hey, this is something that people experience and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I love that we're able to lift the veil, and for anyone who is following us and listening to this is a really great place to be, because whether all of it or even a portion of it resonates with you, it will offer you an opportunity to maybe look at things differently, maybe treat yourself with a little bit more kindness, or view others with just a different lens, a more accepting, more open-hearted lens. That leads me into what we're going to talk about first, and that is, there's a ton of misconceptions about mental wellness, mental health, particularly anxiety. It's a tricky thing to understand because, again, we're living in a time where we have a combination of generations, some of which are very open and willing to speak on this topic. We have another generation who is completely shut off from this topic. This is a taboo topic. And we have a very young, fresh generation that is relying on us being very clear and providing clarity around this topic. So myths have occurred, as they do with all topics in human existence. And I wondered if, first off, you can help me go through just a real quick list of myths and talk to me about how we dissolve these. Literally, let's bust these myths once and for all, and provide a little bit of relief around what they may have caused, some undue stress on before.
Yeah.
Be good with that?
Yeah. And I'm even just getting goosebumps thinking about it because I'm like so excited for everyone listening on the other end, and just for your brain to like kind of explode in a good way. And for like just things to hit like right in the heart or right in the stomach. That's like, oh, I believe that for so long. And it feels so good to release that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping that comes across, or that just like a lot of self-discovery and awareness is brought about, because these may be even things that like people didn't realize they were myths or things that they learned and were feeling really to their core. And I hope that anyone who's listening to this, you can maybe start to separate these things from yourself. Anyone who experiences anxiety, or if you have a loved one who does, which chances are you do, and they just may not show it. So yeah, I'm excited.
All right, let's do it then. Okay. Myth number 1, anxiety isn't a real illness.
So there's a couple pieces here in this like sentence in particular. Anxiety, the experience of anxiety is totally real. This is something we were talking about, I think, in the previous episode, is that anxiety can be both and just a normal human emotion. Like you start to get butterflies in your stomach before you are in front of a lot of people, or before you meet someone new, or like you actually feel anxious because someone is driving really dangerously and you're in the passenger seat and you're like, this doesn't feel very good, right? You're just on high alert, like normally in those situations, because that's part of how our brain works and our instincts and all of that. But then there's also a point at which feeling anxious or having that fear or that self-doubt and that overthinking all the time can add up to actually interrupting our lives. So, this is something that even my mom still doesn't fully understand. Because on the outside, there's like bird flying in front of my window. I think he like flew into it, but he's okay. He flew off. um, and so like, because on the outside, I, I had the straight A's. I like was very social. I had my shit together, so you could say. And when I told my mom or really shared with anyone else, like that I struggled so much with anxiety and even being depressed on many days, they're like, "What? But you function just fine." And actually, there's a thing called, and I hate categorizing things because honestly, it makes it a little easier for us to talk about it. But the categories, just know that when I say any of these terms, like a generalized anxiety disorder or like high functioning anxiety, that they're just like words that we use to talk about things. But there's lots of there's spectrums, there's lots of places in between, nuances. But I found out I had what was called like high functioning anxiety, which almost was like felt worse to have because people didn't believe that I was actually struggling. And that kind of sucked when I would say, "Hey, I'm actually going through this and this and this." And it'd be like, "Oh no, you're actually fine," or just like suck it up, or just let it go, or stop overthinking, stop being so dramatic. And I was like, I'm not being dramatic. I'm not overthinking. Like literally, this is something that stops me from living a full life. It's like, "Oh, but you're living a full life. You have good grades. You have a boyfriend. You have friends." It's like, yeah, but I go home and then I cry for however many hours, or I feel exhausted for however many days in a row, or like my mind is in a very dark place. Like that is not like, I feel like I'm trapped in a cage, right? Like anxiety felt like it had like a cage around me, and it was something that controlled my entire life and my entire being. Even the good grades I was getting because I was afraid of the judgment of others if my grades were not good enough. It came from this place of like trying to avoid the pain of judgment.
Right.
And so anxiety is real, but and there is a point at which anxiety can be too much. And it's not just like a normal instinct or an emotion that serves us. It can get to a point where it's actually interrupting our lives and harming us so much. But I don't like to call it an illness,
Okay.
because anxiety is something that humans naturally experience. And implying that it's an illness, I feel like takes away our power in how we can reduce how much we experience it, or like uncover the roots of where it's coming from. And illness also makes us feel like can make you feel like you're broken, but you're really not. It's just, hey, maybe you went through a whole bunch of trauma, or maybe you have grown up with low self-esteem, or maybe you've grown up with these things that have led you to experiencing a lot of anxiety, or even if it's something that is genetic, which, because there are like genetic reasons for developing it as well. And I'm not surprised I developed it, like after coming from a long line of people with mental health struggles and alcoholism that they were using to cope with those struggles, that like I was probably genetically predisposed to it a little bit as well. Um, but I still, regardless whether it's genetic or environmental, like I don't like to call it an illness, because that's implying that like we're not operating correctly as human beings, whereas really we're just like wounded children or wounded humans in like our adult bodies. And often anxiety doesn't come to the surface until we start to get older. There are some people who all of a sudden get it at 30. I have a client who all of a sudden got it um, after she had her daughter, and it like all of a sudden came about. But that doesn't mean that she all of a sudden got sick, or all of a sudden she's ill. No, there's just her body is just reacting normally to probably shifts in her hormones and a lot of things in her childhood that are now magnified because she has a child that she like cut her brain covered up for a while, right? So
Sure.
yeah, I don't like that term. I don't like the term illness. I don't like a lot of these words or categories, but they can be helpful in when we start
Yeah.
to talk about anxiety and mental health and all of that. And anyone who identifies with the term like illness or disorder, um, it could be freeing at first as well too. Like I know that when when I was told by a therapist that I had like generalized anxiety disorder and high functioning anxiety, I was like, I got to put a name on it. And so whether like if illness is something that's like defeating for you, throw that word out the door. But if it is empowering for a while and you realize like, hey, that's not me, this is just something that I have, and now we can do something about it, or I can heal it, I can kind of detach it from who I am, it's just something that I have, it can be helpful. So yeah, I just want to recognize both sides of the coin, both sides of that story, that it might be empowering for every person to experience it differently, which is why I don't throw the term out altogether. I don't like it overall because of some of the negative like
I
connotations.
can totally appreciate that. Even as you're
Yeah.
speaking, I thought, yeah, it has this negative connotation to it. It's almost better to refer to it as it's a condition. It's a condition of the human spirit. And
Yeah.
that gives it some lightness in and of itself. Words carry a lot of power, but I also love what you said there in knowing that the word illness can give it some tangibility.
Mm-hmm.
When something has maybe a diagnosis or a label attached to it, you've sought professional help and now can clearly identify it.
Yeah.
That gives you something tangible to work with. And for many of us, having that ability to give it a name, that provides a lot of relief in terms of how will I approach my healing process. So I can see both sides of that and totally appreciate you busting this. It's a real thing, though, is what we're getting at. It is a real thing.
Yes.
Call it what you will. It is very, very real.
Yeah.
I very much resonate with your story of your client.
Yeah.
Anxiety has shown up in my life, but not until I had my daughter. And it was something that I'm very aware of now, but struggled to recognize in the early phases, it's so I really, I really appreciate this talk.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to myth number 2. All right. Anxiety will go away on its own.
I really don't think so. I don't think anxiety can just go away by itself. And the reason that I believe in that, and I initially was like, maybe it could go away by itself, but then I realized like, hell no, it can't, is because I tried to just hope it would go away. Right? I tried to think it was just going to go away when I finished my PhD and I had the degrees and I had the good job, or I had a good relationship and I had all these great like things on the outside, that would make me feel safer, that would make me feel happier. When I had all these things, when I had, the house, I had the kids, and I had all this kind of stuff, like I was going to be fine. Like I'm just feeling like uncomfortable right now because I don't have all those things. But the problem was the things, like anything on the external cannot fix something internally. It cannot. No matter how many good grades I got, no matter how many compliments I got from my partners, no matter how many compliments I got from other people, no matter how much love was sent my way, no matter how much people appreciated me, there was something within me that was just that like did not allow me to be happy. Right. And so I think I was even trying to like fill up my happiness by like buying certain things, right? Dopamine hits. Oh, I got an Amazon order, I'm so excited about this, or I like bought this thing for myself, or I'm doing this for myself. But it wasn't really getting to the core of where that anxiety was coming from. It wasn't dealing with that. And I truly believe that anxiety is just a symptom of what's going on underneath, and what is really, really happening within us. And this like chronic search for happiness through things or people or through the external is just almost like a band-aid on like dealing with the internal, but maybe even not band-aid. I don't like to think of it as band-aid because that would, excuse me. That would imply that like the wound is healing like by itself.
Okay.
But it doesn't. It's more like trying to like put your hand on like a pipe that's bursting, right? It's still leaking, and you're putting your hand there or like putting some tape on it is not actually fixing it, right? It's just like trying to slow it down or like trying to cover it up. And I very many times, and anyone who's experienced anxiety, even at just like not necessarily a very severe level, has probably done this, but I was just trying to like distract myself away from it, whether it was with a lot of TV, drugs, alcohol, like eating when I was really stressed, working out to try to get rid of stress. Like all of these were just ways I was trying to numb the anxiety away, because otherwise I would be like wallowing in it, right? Sometimes it'd be hard to get out of bed. Sometimes it'd be hard to leave the house. Sometimes I'd be like, just like completely trapped in my own thoughts. And that would turn into like fights with my partner because I was going down these like spirals and scenarios, and just like very disconnected from reality, and my brain like just overtaking my life. And I thought it was going away when I was distracted, like with TV, or when I was trying to numb it away. But it was really just like trying to put my hand on that pipe and trying to like cover it up. And so for a while, like it made it feel like my house wasn't flooding, but that was a temporary like solution to the problem. And so it really took a lot of internal work. It took first like learning how to cope in general instead of trying to numb, was really, really important. And then once I was able to kind of cope and even just start to self-regulate, then I was able to start to look inward, and meditation was really important for this. Mindfulness and just building up self-awareness in so many different ways was really important for me to realize, hey, the anxiety is actually just a symptom of me fearing judgment, me having these other pains that I've experienced that my like brain is trying to protect me from, me fearing like other people abandoning me, or me fearing the feeling of not being good enough. And so that's why like my brain is trying to think my way out of it, or like cover it up with external things to make me feel happy and feel better about myself, or trying to fix my body to be better, or fix myself to be smarter, or like just the whole people pleasing thing, right? That was all just a symptom of like this deep like unhappiness within me. And so it took the self-awareness, it took like a whole lot of self-acceptance and self-compassion work, and inner work, like on a daily basis. It's not just something that I was put on medication. Because my mom thought I was bipolar and stuff. But the things like medication can be helpful. They definitely serve a purpose, but it was not getting to the root of like where the symptom was actually coming from. Right.
Sure.
Right. It wasn't fixing the pipe. It wasn't replacing it. And so over the years, I've replaced that pipe that was leaking. So now my happiness and joy is actually from an internal place. So no matter what goes on, not that I'm not affected by external things, but no matter what goes on, like I still have this like deep sense of groundedness, of peace, of contentment, of joy, like a lot of the time. Not that doesn't like feel shaky sometimes, because of course it does. But it's that internal work that was necessary. And there are people in my life, like my dad, that I think he just hoped that his like self-esteem and anxiety struggles would just go away, because he drank his whole life and ended up dying at just 48 from a whole bunch of organ failures, basically, from drinking and not taking care of himself, because he didn't think he was worth taking care of, right? And so like these struggles don't just like go away. They can definitely happen in waves. So right, for some people, it might be increased at a certain point, because of like, when you gave birth to your daughter, or like these other like certain experiences within our bodies or outside of us. But if it's something that is like severe and really interrupting our lives, like that's a sign that it's actually something way deeper that gets to be healed. And I don't want to say needs to be, because no one needs to go through this process.
Sure.
But you get to, right, to feel happier, to feel more at peace, to feel like you're not in that cage anymore that anxiety puts you in, or any mental health struggle. You can really apply this to anything, or even something that's not a mental health struggle. But I know a lot of women listen to this podcast. 1 in 10 women have endometriosis, and it's Endometriosis Awareness Month. And like that can feel like something that controls your life, right? And so, it takes internal work to solve the like unhappiness that all of these conditions are causing us. Yeah.
What a beautiful response to that. My goodness, what I love and what I'm sure we take away from that is it doesn't go away by itself. I mean, there's an opportunity to meet it head on, to discover what else is possible in your life. What layers of living will you be able to experience if you can find even a small amount of courage to meet anxiety head on and do some of that internal work like you mentioned. What a huge beautiful invitation for us to take a deep look at what is possible for ourselves. I love that. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah. And I think that also gives, just as like a quick side note before we go to the
Yeah.
next one, I think it gives everyone who may be experiencing any kind of struggle, like I just get, and especially with anxiety, it helps give us so much power, right? Because instead of it just being something like, oh, we'll hope it will go away, or like going to therapy sessions, or like my therapist will help it go away, or this person that I'm like, if someone works with me as a coach or as a healer, like, I'm going to help take it away from them, or
Mhm.
medication will help take it away. But it's not something that anyone can take away from you. Like um there's work, like there's work that you get to do within to get rid of it. But that also, which I know can scare some people off, because they're like, oh my gosh, I have to do so much work to get rid of the anxiety that I'm experiencing. But what the work does is it makes you feel really powerful, because you are the one who breaks the cage, right?
Yeah.
I'm someone who guides like that other person through that process because I've done it, but I'm not the one who breaks anybody's cage. I might give you the tools to do so, pass them through the bars. Hey, here, use this, use this, use this.
Yeah.
And I'm here cheering you on, right? But the person who's experiencing the struggle, who's experiencing the anxiety, is the one that breaks the cage. And that's really freaking powerful. And you feel like a freaking badass on the other side of it. And
Yeah. I
that's
just
why
got
like my,
shivers.
yeah, that's why my podcast and like part of my brand is Anxiety Ass Kickers, because it is an ass kicking process. Like everyone who's brave enough to do that internal work and to incorporate those new habits, like learn those new tools to like face anxiety and become bigger than it, is an ass kicker, is really powerful and all of that. So
Mm,
yeah, just wanted
love
to
it.
share that too, because I didn't want it to make it seem like a defeating process or like so much work. Like it's actually a really empowering process.
Of course. And maybe we
Yeah.
can get into how we will get into how we develop our self worth so that we can begin to know that it's now time to dive into this work. And, for the audience, I got to just take a moment here. If you guys haven't listened to Anxiety Ass Kickers podcast, it is really, really good. So, I mean, Jessica takes you through so many coping techniques and offers so much of her own personal insight. You can't help but feel like you're hanging out with a friend who just has this abundant wisdom and this open, giving heart that wants to share it all with you. So don't make the mistake of not hopping over. You're on iTunes and Spotify, you're on all the
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
Just go ahead, hit subscribe, give it a few listens, and of course, do what we all need for podcast listeners to do, and that is rate it, share it with other people, pass this kind of thing around. This is really how we extend this type of message, and it's an important message. If you, especially if you yourself find it difficult to speak to a friend who is in a situation where anxiety is present, share this podcast.
Yeah.
Anxiety Ask Kickers, just do that.
Or even if you're someone who experiences it, but you don't yet have the words to explain your own experience, which I was in that
Yeah.
phase for a long time, where I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't even have the strength to explain it to other people, because I was just so tired of people not understanding me, that I would have loved to have like a podcast like this, or something I could hand to someone and say, hey, this is how I feel.
Yep.
Can you listen to it? Like if you love me, please, like I would really, really appreciate this. Right. Because this spoke to me and spoke to my experience. And I didn't know how to share that with you. And now I found a way.
Yeah.
Right.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. What a giving, generous thing to do for someone else. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Let's answer this one. People with anxiety should avoid stressful situations.
We were actually just talking about this before we started recording. But one thing that is actually important to do, and obviously in a way that's not very traumatizing, but it's important to expose yourself to things that make you feel anxious. Not in a way that's going to like send you into a panic attack, but if you do end up having one, that's okay. Or that will like make your anxiety feel way worse. But what it actually does when you do expose yourself to stressful situations and the anxiety starts to bubble up, or you even end up going through a panic attack for whatever reason, for whatever stress you're experiencing, the fact that you survive it and you get through it is like, hey, my heart was beating this fast and I had all these weird physical symptoms and I was sweating from places in my body I didn't know like could sweat before. And I felt like I was going to die, but actually I'm okay. Then it's like, whoa, actually like I'm okay. So I think that's a really important thing to learn when you are at like, even like almost before you are really grounded in many different coping skills. It's important to realize that if the anxiety starts to happen, that it's like, hey, even though this is happening, I'm safe. I may feel like crap, but I'm safe. I'm actually going to be okay. And this is something that will pass. And so I want to be a little bit careful here because I'm not telling anyone who experiences a lot of anxiety to like go throw yourself into many stressful situations, but it doesn't mean that you can't go through any at all. Like remember the phrase, or remember that energy of, hey, I'm safe and this is a temporary feeling. And I'm going to survive this, even though like my anxiety is triggered. And yeah, so it's that balance. I don't want everyone to like throw themselves or immerse themselves in very stressful situations to try to just like make the anxiety go away. Although that can be, in the right circumstance, like a way to accelerate the healing process. And that's actually something that, we were talking about earlier. For me, something that's a very triggering thing are lilies. So the type of flower, because I've been to probably over a dozen funerals in my 26 years of living, and started going to them very young. And very many of them, I was in the front row of the wake, and I've just had many close family members pass away. And the smell of lilies like reminds me so much of death and funerals. And even still in the store, I mean, I love arranging flowers, and that's one of like my little hobbies now, is I love doing that. I love buying several different bouquets of flowers and arranging them. But when I see lilies, like it makes me cringe. And so actually what I plan to do is, kind of in an iterative way or in a slow way, is like start to have more memories associated with lilies that aren't the ones associated with death. So like expose myself to like, I should probably start buying lilies and putting them in my house, and create some better memories with them. So it's not such
like building a tolerance. Is that, that's sort of the, okay. Yeah. I love that idea.
And the same thing with people who experience anxiety when they drive or when they fly, or I had, people might say like, oh, I just had a fear of spiders, but it was actually to the point where I would panic if there was a spider in my room. I wouldn't sleep in that room. And people like, oh my God, it's just a fear of spiders. But it was something that was like starting to interrupt my life. And especially when our family would go up to the lake house, there'd be a lot of spiders, and it would be a very traumatizing experience. Like it sucked. And people were just like, oh, just get over it. But it's not something that can just be gotten over. And sometimes so when I went to Costa Rica in college for a research trip, I was exposed to a whole lot of spiders. Sure. I even went through an experience where it wasn't an actual spider. It's called a tailless whip scorpion, but it looks like a spider. They're totally harmless to humans, but I had it put on my face.
Oh,
so that I could just get over the fear of having weird insects like around me and things that look really scary, but they're not. Yes, there are still there are still poisonous spiders, and spiders can hurt you. But now, even though I still don't like spiders, I'm way less scared of them after that experience.
Sure, I bet. I'm just having visions of Joe Rogan and Fear Factor right now.
I'm not telling everyone to go through Fear Factor, right? But like, it's definitely a myth that like anyone who has anxiety like should avoid all stress, because what that's going to do is it's just going to like teach your body, well, one, that you can't handle things, that you're not going to be able to survive stressful situations, that you can't get through it. But when you actually expose yourself to stress in doses and in a place that's actually safe, you're not like threatening your life with it, that it's helpful in the healing process. Like even doing something like going skiing, which is in itself, like there's obviously some danger and stuff associated with it, but like exposing yourself to like stress in those ways can actually help. Yeah.
It's like you're
And the
speaking right to
dopamine
my
helps a
heart
little
right
bit
now.
too. Yeah, the adrenaline like actually helps like almost as like a release of the anxiety you're experiencing too.
Yeah, okay. I
Yeah.
think this is great advice. I think, I mean, it's something that is well within the capabilities of all of us.
Mhm.
And once we discover that we're ready to take that step, this is
Yeah.
certainly something that will allow us to move into freeing ourselves from these sometimes crippling fears that we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. Because
You
it's
know,
not a,
again,
yeah.
revealing a different aspect of life that you might not have had the chance to experience if you were to succumb to the anxious feelings all the time and just avoid life in general.
Yeah. Cause like removing the discomfort and like removing all life stress is not possible. Like I think I've said this, I've used this analogy before, but you know, you could try to move to like a tropical island in the middle of nowhere, but even there, like without other people and all the coconuts you can eat, you'll probably still experience some stress. Like maybe a hurricane is going to come through. Like you can't avoid stress, like even if you moved away from everybody and everything. And so it just makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot more empowering to just become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Right. And realizing like, hey, okay, I'm either going to survive this anxiety like wave, or I am building up the tools to be able to better handle the discomfort. Right. So putting yourself in those just like uncomfortable situations in those small doses and in a place where you actually feel safe, like helps you practice a lot of those coping tools, a lot of healthy ones, so that when real shit hits, like my client's brother-in-law just had passed away, and like that was, and all of a sudden he's super young, like he's like 30 something, and having done like a little bit of stress exposure leading up to that point, like helped her even during the funeral when she was panicking to find a safe place within her own mind. Right. And so when real stress hits, then you're prepared. Right. So you have to, trauma is a part of the human experience. Stress is a part of the human experience. And so the best thing we can do is to become prepared and like become comfortable with discomfort.
Okay, let's take a look at the next myth or misconception that we can sort of solve for here, Jessica. This one is one that actually really stood out to me. Anxiety disorders are not common. What do you think about that?
They're actually very, very common. So you may not think that you know anyone with anxiety, but so some of the stats on it, and they have probably changed, but in the U.S., it's 1 in 5 U.S. adults will have an anxiety disorder, like a diagnosable anxiety disorder in their lifetime. What 1 in 5, so 20%. It's probably higher now, having the whole globe experienced a pandemic and lockdown and all of that. In situations like where I came from, PhD students, 40% of PhD students experiencing anxiety and depression. And I actually think the statistic is higher, and that people just don't talk about it, or people don't share that they're experiencing it because it becomes so common that it seems normal, right? That's something that everybody's just doing, is they're just working 12 hours, or they're like rushing to get this done. And like all of those actually very anxious behaviors like just seem like a part of being a PhD student, and it becomes one and the same. So yeah, they're actually it's very, very common for people to experience an amount of anxiety that sucks. I don't want to say is like that is crippling, or that is joy crushing, really. Yeah, it's actually super, super, super common. And even if someone doesn't know that they have anxiety, because I didn't know I had it for a really long time. I just thought I was like, okay, I'm a high achiever. I'm a perfectionist. I work really hard. There's a lot of, you may be experiencing it and have no idea, and think that it's normal. And common and normal are two very different things.
Oh yeah, they're very different. Common and normal are very different. Okay,
Yeah.
so 1 in 5 people. I just want just pause just for a moment. Think about that. How many families of 5 do you know?
Yeah.
We're a family of 5. That
Yeah.
means one person in this household, statistically, and maybe even higher,
Yeah.
is prone to being, suffering with some level of anxiety. And if we think
Yeah.
about how many families we know of 5, or even groupings of your friends, next time you're with a group of friends, and I hope that that's really, really soon for those of us still in restrictive mode, um, a small group, we're allowed to be in groups of 5 right now. So one of those people in that group that we're allowed to be with is going to statistically have anxiety.
Yeah. Or likely even more, because if you're someone who has anxiety, it's likely that other family members do.
Mhm.
I know that that's likely something my sister struggles with, although I don't tell that to her face because she's not at that stage yet. You can't just do that. You can't just be like, you have anxiety and you should heal yourself. No, you don't do that to people. Even if you're at that awareness level. I know that my dad definitely struggled with it.
Yeah.
And often it can even happen like more in these like groups too, or even in your friend group, right? If like in my friend group in grad school, probably all of us, like, or at least half of us, if not more, struggled with anxiety, or maybe all of us did, right? And people just didn't talk about it um, because you will often associate with people who are like you,
Mhm.
right? And so if you're a people pleaser and you're surrounding yourself with other people pleasers, which is that's like a symptom of, not that it's like, oh, if you're a people pleaser, you have anxiety, but they usually overlap, being like a chronic people pleaser or being
Okay.
someone who's like very much a giver and always taking care of other people. A
Mhm.
lot of those people hang out together, right?
Mhm. I could see that. Yep.
Nurses, teachers, people who like serve others often like hang out in groups because of their career and all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes even if you look within your circle, rather than thinking like 1 in 5, is like, holy crap, maybe it's everybody. Or maybe it's half, or maybe it's more, right? And just keeping, I think, your mind open to, hey, it might just be one person I know, but maybe it's like a third of the people I know. Maybe it's half the people I know,
Right.
right?
Which
Yeah.
brings me to the next myth is it obvious when someone has an anxiety disorder?
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't have to be like, well, me as someone who knows a lot of the symptoms because I've experienced them, who's worked with clients and can see that. I can even hear someone describing another person's behavior and be like, oh, they probably struggle with high functioning anxiety, or I bet they have a codependent relationship with their partner, or they're struggling with codependency, like really really bringing them down. And codependency and anxiety often happen together as well. um, and so for me, it's a lot of it seems pretty obvious because I've trained myself kind of to identify all of that. But to
Mhm.
someone who's like, to the untrained eye, I guess you could say, it's not obvious. And like I was saying earlier, like even still to this day, my mom like struggles to grasp that what I was experiencing was anxiety, because I looked fine on the outside. You can still be social, but then need however many hours to recharge your batteries, right? You can be someone who just seems like kind and very compassionate to other people, but actually you have so much love that you give to others because you don't know how to give it to yourself, and it's way easier to give it to other people,
Mhm.
right? And so you just seem like a kind person. You seem like a great human. And so that it can, I even have like, if you like scroll back on like my Instagram page, I have a little video, like it's kind of funny because I make really stupid faces in it. A video of like the secret symptoms of anxiety, like digestive problems. People are like, oh yeah, I just have IBS or I have a gluten intolerance or something. But digestive problems, I found that I experienced way more before I had the anxiety I experienced under control. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, so it's not always obvious. It can be obvious in people who are experiencing like panic attacks, or like you might know kids who are just really sensitive, right? Or who are easily like traumatized. So there it might seem obvious, but there's lots of people where it doesn't seem obvious. For me, it didn't look obvious. I had the straight A's, I had a boyfriend, I had my stuff together, I was working, I was a functioning human being,
Yeah.
right? But and I was kind and I was nice a lot of the time. I wasn't I wasn't very like snappy or irritable. For me, I was really great at hiding it. And I think that anxiety is a tricky thing. And, especially this tie to low self-worth is a tricky thing, because often we're afraid to show others that we're struggling, or afraid to show others that we're experiencing the anxiety, or even just whatever emotion we're going through in general, because we want to make sure we look good on the outside, and we don't want people to judge us for what we're experiencing. So we're really good at hiding it. I was very good at hiding it. And I didn't even know that, like, I hid it from myself. I was just like, nope, everything's fine. I got this perfect box on the outside. I am fine. People ask you how you're doing. I'm good. I'm fine. Right. Because I was afraid to show that vulnerability. Right.
Of course.
Yeah. And we don't want to be vulnerable. Whereas vulnerability is actually really, really powerful. It just doesn't seem like it, because it can be painful to be vulnerable. But many people who have anxiety, including myself, when I was peaking with it, it was almost an instinct to try and hide it.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Anxiety is such a powerful thing. It makes my brain immediately compares it to something like electricity, where electricity is something that it's there. You don't see it. It's super powerful, but every once in a while it'll let off a spark. Like it lets off a flare or something that to remind you that it's still there. That's like the comparison that I create in my mind, because to me they seem very similar in their essence.
These flare-ups, right? I'll often have people ask me, especially clients that are working with me for a while, it's like, oh, I'm experiencing all this anxiety again, and I don't even know why. Like, I already experienced all this stress, and now everything should be fine. It should be back to normal. It's like, and sometimes it can, well, one, just once you slow down enough, your body's like, okay, I'm going to release a whole bunch of anxiety now. Because you were like, you were almost like stopping those sparks from happening. You were like putting a wall up that's like, nope, and you were holding a lot of the sparks back. And then when you finally let down your guard, it's like a lot of it can come out. So I like that analogy of electricity. That's a really good one, that it sometimes can just like sporadically happen. Sometimes it happens due to a specific thing. And also it's something that you can put a barrier up to block, but that doesn't mean it's not happening, right? Yeah. That doesn't mean it's not there. It still might be flaring up, right?
Yeah. Very powerful.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've covered off a lot of these myths that really needed to be addressed, dissolving them or busting them, whatever you like to call it. I think it's a healthy thing for us to kind of work through. I'm just reading. It's obvious when someone has anxiety. No, it's not always. We've touched on this before, but real briefly, do you mind just circling back to the idea of medication in anxiety? Is medication, this is one of our myths to bust, is medication the only way to manage anxiety effectively?
Definitely not. And I'll speak to my own experience. I'll speak to some of my clients' experiences, but overall, everyone has a different experience with medication. It might work really well for some people. But I know that most commonly the story is the side effects can really suck. And this is not to turn anyone away from using medication or feeling shameful around using medication to treat anxiety or anything, because it can be really helpful. It can even be life-saving in some situations to just do anything to quell the symptoms. But it's not the only way. And I was put on like a hormonal medication to try to stop my waves of hormones that were leading to like mood swings and kind of increased anxiety, or what my mom thought was like bipolar disorder. But my moods got a lot worse, and I actually started experiencing very heavy waves of depression and like suicidal tendencies. And I know many people who have tried different types of medications for depression and anxiety and have had to go through very many because of bad symptoms of like nausea and vomiting and like haziness and dissociating from their body and all of these things, right? And so that's why because of what I've experienced, I relied on like purely holistic methods to learn how to cope with stress and anxiety, and then also get to the root of it and actually start to heal it, because I do think it's something that is healable. It's not just like a symptom or something that needs to be managed. It's not like it. I believe that it is curable, because I've experienced that myself, and that's something that many of my clients experience as well. Like, it's like I said, like breaking free from the cage, right? And also noting that it's just a symptom of something deeper, right? So when you find out where it's actually coming from, whether it's these traumatic experiences or low self-esteem that makes us like present ourselves as anxious people to avoid that low, like that pain. It yeah, it's not just something that is like what we have to manage. It is something curable. I think it is something that we get to heal. And and other notes about like medication versus like other methods, like other kinds of coping skills, other kinds of like self-compassion and self-acceptance like methods, or energetic methods or spiritual practices. Like, these are all different kinds of practices that I use and that I teach. They can be done along with medication. They can be done completely without it. They can be done like it. There's so many different healing paths for people. But you don't have to, especially if you're someone who doesn't want to, or if you've had bad experiences with medication, you don't have to use it. And that's not because like, oh, because you don't want to do the work, or you don't want to learn the coping skills, or you don't want to learn all these other techniques, or you don't want to use holistic methods, that if you turn to medication, it's something to be ashamed of, or that's defeating, because that's definitely not the truth. I've had people who have, I don't want to say people that I've offended, but people who have like just heard the message so many times about how taking medication is a shameful thing, like feel hurt by me sharing, medication's not the only way to treat anxiety.
Yeah.
But it's, so I just want to remove the shame around it, that I'm not shaming it or like saying anyone should feel bad about taking it, because it can be really helpful.
Sure. Yeah.
But that everyone has a choice of like what to put in their body, and whether it's something they want to take or don't want to take. I had a client who, even using something so-called natural like CBD, like ended up giving her a really terrible reaction, and she was hospitalized. And it made her like, it actually accelerated her anxiety and put her through a whole bunch of physical symptoms that were really terrible. So she doesn't even put anything in her body like that to try to deal with the anxiety that she has and to heal it. And so we'll do things like meditation and mindfulness practices and energetic practices, journaling, a lot of the other like coaching and healing that I do with her, which is like also a valid way to treat it, right? And it's a valid way to heal it and cure it. And so I think what's really important about this, like busting this myth, is just presenting everybody with options. Like, and that everyone's healing journey is a little bit different. Everyone's experience is a little bit different. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Like, whatever gets you to where, like, to actually break free from the cage and like feeling better, like that's what matters, Doesn't matter how you get there, and you don't have to feel ashamed for anything that you try or anything that doesn't work, because that can be really defeating too, is like trying medication or even being told that like, hey, medication is going to fix you. But I think that's something that's said to like encourage people to do something about the anxiety that they have. I don't want to bring big pharma ethics into this, but
one of my favorite topics.
That is a story that exists. That is a reality that exists. That there are people trying to make money there.
Sure.
Not that all doctors are just trying to make money, but that is a thing that can happen. And just that everybody has choices. There are so many options. Medication is not the only way. If it's something you don't want to put in your body, you don't have to. You don't have to do it. I was never put on an anxiety or depression like medication specifically, but I was put on like hormone treatments to try to deal with it. And so I haven't experienced like antidepressants or like anti-anxiety medications myself. But I have many clients who have, and they just were like, nope. and they transitioned off of it with their doctor, not by my advice or anything, by their own choice before they even met me. And they found so much more healing and so much more empowerment in using holistic tools and just doing things in a way that felt really good to them. And so it's about finding what feels good to you and knowing you have a lot of options.
Yeah, I think that's the most empowering thing. Absolutely, is knowing. And maybe that's where some of the fear and the shame come from, is around medicine, is that, most of us, or I shouldn't say most, some of us grow up thinking that medication is the way to solve any type of issue that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's even suggested that that may or may not work for you, the frustration turns into anger or fear, thinking, well, if that's not going to work, am I stuck here?
Mm-hmm.
But then being exposed to some of the strategies that you're speaking to, the holistic practices. I know for me, I manage a lot of my anxious emotions through using my essential oils. I mean, just breathing in an aromatic compound, journaling, meditation, all of these things that you're speaking to. And it is really revolutionary to know that you have access to these tools at all times and wherever you are. Like, it's a fascinating thing. It's very, very liberating. So I love that you clarify that myth, because it is exactly that. It is a myth that has compromised a lot of joy, I'm sure, for a lot of people over a long period of time.
I think it's the most well-known way to treat anxiety. But I would not say it's the best way because of so many of the side effects. And yeah, how many iterations it can take for people to find like the medication that works for them. And it can be a really painful process. For some people it is successful, but that's a very small percentage, like statistically and stuff. And so, and I honestly think like the holistic practices and the coping tools and all of that I teach and that you practice and that you teach, like it should be like just taught as like a standard. It should be taught in school. Like, I don't know, algebra is important, but how about like emotional and like self-regulation? Like that'd be great if I learned that as a kid.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah. And they're starting to incorporate it more at younger ages. And you can bet my kids are going to be meditating by the time they're 3, but like it's it's great that we have medication to treat so many different illnesses in the Western world, but people have been treating things for a really long time before Western medicine.
Yeah.
And we have access to all of that knowledge. So why not like use all of it? Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Get access to everything and then make an informed choice.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. Okay. So we have busted a lot of myths. I know that we've spent just such a beautiful amount of time together, and you and I could likely go on much more than
for sure.
These episodes. But we really wanted to circle back to the concept of self-worth, because we've talked a lot about discovering and implementing coping strategies in one's life. We've talked about myths of anxiety, but all of these can be somewhat irrelevant, or I guess irrelevant, if we don't have a handle on self-worth, because we will not take the appropriate steps to healing ourselves if we don't recognize the worth within us to pursue these steps. So I wonder if you would kind of just sort of take us through a little bit of a talk. I'm not even going to gear this to any particular question. Just let's speak on the topic of self-worth. Let's end this conversation. Let's end these 2 episodes together with a few things. Your ideas on self-worth, how we acquire it in the first place, how it becomes established, and is there a way to overcome some negative aspects of our own personal self-worth? Because in doing so, I know it reveals layers of beauty that we can't even comprehend at this point.
Yeah. I'm so excited for like what's about to come out of my mouth. I have no idea what will. But there are just a lot of ideas buzzing in my brain, and that is definitely the universe sending me a sign that this is something that needs to go out into the world. So whatever comes out of my mouth, I think is going to be awesome. But the thing that that almost I needed to hear, or that many people that I like or work with, or just anyone I think who goes through the healing process in general, that needs to hear before they start that journey or start working on themselves or start realizing that like they don't have to live like that forever, is just the fact of, hey, you don't have to live like that forever. You can live differently, right? And that, I think, connects so much to self-worth, because not only do you have to come to that awareness point of like, oh, there's a different way to live, and what I'm struggling with doesn't have to be my normal anymore. You also have to realize, and I'm worthy of doing this. I'm worthy and meant to have a life where I don't experience anxiety, where I don't experience so much suffering, where I don't experience so much struggle. Like coming to the realization of, I'm worthy just because I'm a human, and I exist on this earth. And because of my existence, like I get to enjoy my life. I would like, humans are not born to suffer. I think that's a belief that needs to be thrown out the window, is that humans need to suffer, or like we have to struggle, or you have to, even doing things like hard work to have success or happiness. Like it's not true. It's not true. And if anything, like working so hard and struggling so much just brings more suffering. It doesn't bring happiness or joy or like satisfaction. It really just like feeds your ego, because it just feeds that part of the brain that's like that feeds on fear, that feeds on the identity of like associating us with these external things, because the ego, or that part of our brain, cannot exist without all these external things. And so it must build it up by doing all these external things. And so, yeah, I think that's just really important for people to know, is just to know that because you exist, you deserve to have joy. Because you exist, you deserve to enjoy life. Because you exist, you deserve the days where we're calm, where confidence, where radiating love from within is your normal. And the thing is, like, because we were talking about earlier how common and normal are not the same thing.
Yeah.
Suffering is it's common, but it is not normal. It's not what we're supposed to be experiencing all the time. And how do I know this? I mean, I know it because once I got out of that suffering, and that's not to say that I don't have days where I feel low, because I totally do. And that's part of being part of being a human being is, having emotions that don't feel great, because we just have this wide range of emotions. But overall, like once I got to the point where like feeling peaceful and confident was my normal, anytime I experienced that wave of low, I'm like, oh my God, I used to live like that all the time. Oh, and I used to think that I deserved to live like that. So tying that back to self-worth, is I used to think that I deserved to be struggling, or that I should be. And I was almost like I was punishing myself unknowingly by like putting myself through misery and putting myself through struggle all the time, and almost like not giving myself an option to get out of it, or not thinking I needed help. Oh, I shouldn't need help. I should be able to do this all on my own, or I don't deserve it. Like there are other people who struggle worse than I do. Right. And so that's the people pleasing thing kicking in. But tying to the question that you asked, or where you were kind of guiding the conversation to go, of like, well, where does this come from? Where like, why did I start punishing myself? Why did I not think that I was worthy of having a life where joy was my normal? Why was I like putting myself through all of that struggle? And that's because when I was young, and I think many of us were conditioned with experiences where things sucked, whether it was parents that were fighting in the household, or if it was financial insecurity, or having experienced like loved ones who had addictions, or there was codependency running through the family, dysfunction at all, or even things as like, it doesn't even have to be so severe, like such severe trauma. It could even be things as small as, not small because nothing's small, everyone's stressors are valid, but even if it's something like, I don't know, you were compared to the other kids in class, or a kid bullied you at school, like all of just experiencing anything like that, what it teaches the human mind when we're really young and when we're in these developmental stages is that pain is something you should be experiencing. That's how the world is supposed to be. And you learn that is supposed to be your reality. And so then as you grow up, you're like, I was almost putting myself through more suffering. I was putting myself through more struggle. And it took me a really long time to realize like, hey, this is how I don't have to live anymore, just because it was my reality for so long. Right. And so that's the difference between the familiarity and like the actual comfort. It only felt comfortable because it was what I thought I was supposed to have. Like I was in toxic relationship after toxic relationship. And I'm not surprised because I had a toxic relationship with my father. And so I thought that's how I was supposed to be. And it'll get a little dark for a second. But when I had boys and men taking advantage of me through my teenage years, I thought that's what I was supposed to do as a girl. That I was just supposed to take it. I was just supposed to like, oh, this is, I'm just need to make him happy, or like, this is just my role because that's what I had experienced and that's what I had learned. But that doesn't mean that what you had experienced or learned like is the absolute truth. I just didn't know differently. Right. And so until I learned like, hey, I don't like suffering is not what I was meant to do. And I'm worthy of having, or just starting to believe like I'm worthy of living differently. Mm-hmm. Only at that point was I able to like start healing. And so I would not say that I believed it fully when I started my healing journey, when I started actually doing things to take care of myself, when I started learning good coping skills, when I started like setting my standard as like, I'm not going to be unhappy. I'm not going to be miserable. I'm not going to tolerate crap anymore. When I finally thought I was worthy of like setting a standard, like that's something that developed over time. But even just having even if you just have an inkling of like, oh, I'm worthy of like living differently than this, like that's kind of all the spark that you need. You don't have to believe it fully. That belief and your increase in your self-worth will happen over time. And it's actually part of the healing process. And so, because I have a lot of people that come to me and they're like, oh, but I don't believe like I'm so worthy, or I don't believe I'm like confident and beautiful and wonderful and a valuable human and all of these things. And I'm like, hey, you don't have to believe it. If you need to fake it till you make it, like that's okay. Even if you just have an inkling and a little, I don't want to say like full light, but even if you just have a little flicker in your heart that aligns with that saying of you were put on this earth to enjoy life, not to suffer. Like, even if that just sparkles a little bit and it's not a full glow, like tap into that sparkle, tap into that. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but just like tap into that little flicker, because that will grow with time. And you don't have to have very high self-worth in order to start that healing process. You just got to have a little bit and just be at the point where you're like, enough is enough. Yeah. And I also want to go to or address what you asked about. How do you overcome the negative aspects of like your self-worth, or how do you overcome like developing low self-worth? And the first thing is just a decision that you're like, okay, this is enough. I'm done suffering. I'm done struggling. Like I can't do this anymore. And not that you have to hit a rock bottom. I don't think anybody has to hit a rock bottom before going on that healing journey, but that's something that did happen for me. Like I felt like I was at rock bottom. Like my current partner, actually, that we're about to go on vacation for our 6-year anniversary since meeting each other. After about 3 years, he actually broke up with me because like he just felt like I was pulling him down. Our relationship was extremely codependent. And he just needed to separate himself from me because he was like, I can't help you anymore. Like, he's like, I have to separate myself from you, like for me, because I feel like I'm being dragged down. And not that I don't blame him or anything. That was actually like part of the spark for me. That was like, oh, like I can't find happiness through him or through other people. Like I have to do this for me. Right. And so
amazing.
Yeah. Just realizing like you have to do it for yourself. Like all you need is just a little hint. Like you just need to make that decision. Because you can like be listening to I don't know, things like podcasts like this, or like be absorbing a lot of that knowledge for a while. But it's when you finally make that decision that it's like, I can't live like this anymore. That's when the actions start to happen. That's when your habits start changing. That's when your beliefs start changing, your behaviors start changing, and actually your self-worth starts to grow. It happens when you make that decision that it's like, I can do, like, I have to do this because it's what I'm meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Um, and I think that answers everything. Unless you want
Yeah.
more, unless you want me to like,
No,
really
you weren't sure
more.
what you were going to say there. Like you just spoke some serious magic, my friend. I don't know if the listeners have ever heard of the butterfly effect. And if you haven't, I would highly recommend that you Google it after listening to this podcast. Just Google it, do yourself a favor, because Jessica, what you just described is something of a butterfly effect in sharing your vulnerable story. And thank you for that. You're always so generous. Like I said, your giving spirit is just part of the wonderful package that is you. But when you shared the story of your partner breaking up with you and recognizing his own self-worth, and needing to pursue something independently for a variety of reasons, of which are his own, that you described that was part of your spark. And in sparking you, therefore, you became not just a little spark. There's a bit of a glow going on there until you were an absolute glowing beacon of light.
Mm-hmm.
And the work that you do now is such a direct reflection. Can we trace it all the way back to that one single action? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. But it certainly is part of the equation. And in you transforming your life or following the intuition, the intuitive guidance that it was offered to you, you have now rippled those benefits out to so many people, including myself. And I am forever grateful for being partnered with you, for becoming friends with you, and for having this chance to have you on Planting Wildflowers. You've just enriched so many lives, and I couldn't thank you enough for being part of my life. You're a joy.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. And like, that's not the first time I've heard the rippling effect, to describe me. Someone had described me as like, just because of how much self-worth and how much self-worth I have developed, how much I've grown that light within myself, that it's almost like I'm like in the center of, the ocean of the world, and I'm sending ripples of that love out into the rest of the world to other people. But I'm only able to do that because of how much healing I've done myself and how much love I have to give to other people. Right. I was for so long, like, trying to take care of others, trying to like help other people, but from a place of low self-worth. And so I was never able to give very much because I was so empty. I was so empty. And now I feel so like full. And it like, I'm so happy to be on this podcast, and I'm so happy to share so much and like give so much, because I have so much to give. Like, it's all rippling out and that like into the universe. And it feels really good and it feels natural. And the thing is that this is how we're all supposed to be. And imagine if we all had really strong senses of self-worth, if we all were like in this place where we took care of ourselves so well, and we gave everything to ourselves that we needed, and we listened to our intuition all the time, how much freaking love would be rippling out through the world? Like, right. So we're like, whoever you are, like, keep getting closer to that light glowing brighter, right, within you. And because then that's what allows you to give so much more. Because I know so many people listening to this are the kind that give so much to other people, right? You and me are going to attract people who are givers, but possibly who are givers in a place from like that feels empty too. Because you can be a giver and feel empty. But imagine how much more of a giver and a light you can be when you fertilize that light within yourself, right? I keep using these like earthy terms, but this is the Planting Wildflowers podcast, right? So, yeah.
Oh, Jessica, this is so friggin' good. Man,
Yeah.
this has been fun. Can you remind the audience before we sign off?
Hmm.
Tell us once again how we get in touch with you, what you've got upcoming, and just
Yeah.
how we can remain part of your life.
Yeah. So my full name is Jessica Stephanie Dabrowski, and my Instagram handle, where I hang out mostly on Instagram, is jessica.stephanie16. So that's JESSICA dot STEPHANIE16. And we'll like link all these things below. So if you're like, I didn't get that fast, like totally fine. Links will be available. We'll put my email down there. My website, I think, will be functioning by then. So we'll put that in there. And we spoke a lot about coping strategies in the last podcast, and we talked a little bit about them here. And that's something that I have that's about to go on sale now. So if anyone's listening to this like before April 1st and wants to get in on a coping skills course that I have, I'll give you guys a discount code, and before April 1st, you'll be able to join like a small or a group program that goes with it. So if you're needing like more support from me, and yeah, and just, you can always reach out to me like just to connect, or if you want it, or if you've been drawn to work with me. Actually, someone who listened to your podcast, who follows you, like reached out to me and like applied to work with me. Even just after you mentioning that our podcasts were coming out on social and stuff. So yeah, if you feel like called to like apply to work with me, you don't need to, I don't know. If you feel connected to me, like know that is enough to want to work with me or something. We don't need to become, you don't need time, I think, to become very good friends. And I think that's happened with you and me, Rebecca. Like,
Oh gosh, yes.
sometimes it can just happen, right? You can
Yeah.
just feel really connected to a person. So yeah, my Instagram will be down there, my email, my website, ways to work with me will be down there as well, if people feel really called to do that. But otherwise, I just really want, like, if anyone wants to have a conversation about anything in this podcast, yeah, definitely reach out to me, reach out to Rebecca. Like, my favorite thing is connecting with more humans. So, yeah, you can definitely chat with me and don't feel weird. You can be like, oh my God, I absolutely loved you on this podcast. Or like, I have no idea what to say, but you're like, I just need to talk to you. Like, totally fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I hope you do, friends. I really do. I hope you do.
Oh, and
Just that's
we already
probably why.
mentioned it. We already
What's
mentioned
that?
it, but just a reminder, I have a podcast as well. So the Anxiety Ass
Yes.
Kickers podcast, or I think it also, if you look up my name, Jessica Dabrowski, it should pop up, but we'll link it. Or you could, Anxiety Ass Kickers is spelled how it sounds. And that should be easy to find. So people can connect to me through there as well.
It's good. It's
Yeah.
good. And people can feel your heart in that podcast. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet friend. Well, I almost hate to say goodbye, but all good things must come to an end, right? This is the finale of our second episode together. And who knows, in
Yeah.
the future, let's plan to connect again, maybe recap
Absolutely.
as the world shifts into whatever is sort of next, what is around the corner for us. Maybe it would be of some value for you and I to connect once again and just kind of
Yeah.
check in with our hearts, see what's going on, and how we might be able to provide some value. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I know it's a very valuable resource, and you are absolutely wonderful. Thank you for being part of this podcast.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for listening. I love you all so much, and I hope you can feel that through your headphones.
For sure. It's a vibe. Thanks, Jessica. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, friends. Thank you for hanging out with us here at the Planting Wildflowers podcast. We'll look forward to seeing you again real soon. And in the meantime, if you would be so kind as to rate, subscribe, and share this podcast with others, I'd be most grateful. We'll catch you again soon. Until then, take good care.